वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे पीड़ पराई जाने रे पर दुखे उपकार करे तो मन अभिमान नो याने रे वैष्णव जन दो सकल लोक मा सौने वंदे वाच काज मना निजल राखे धन धन जननी तेनी रे वैष्णव जन दो समदृष्टि ने कृष्ण त्यागी परस्त्री जैने मातरे थकी सचन बोले पर धन न जाले हाथ रे वैष्णव जन दो मोह माया व्यापे नहीं जैने मन मारे राम नाम सुरे ताली लागी सकल तीरथ तेना तन मारे वैष्णव जन दो वन लोभी ने कपट रहित भे काम चौधरी वाया रे पणे नरसैयो तेनु दर्शन करता कूड़ा ये को तेर तार्या रे वैष्णव जन दो उत्तरं यत्समुद्रस्य हिमाद्रेश्चैव दक्षिणम् वर्षं तद्भारतं नाम भारती यत्र सन्ततिः.
The country that lies north of the ocean and south of the snowy mountains is called Bharatvarsha. In this ancient land, from time immemorial, the eternal snows of the Himalayas, wrapped in deep meditation, have formed a part of the life of the people, bound by a sacred thread of common heritage. The plains are watered by 1,000 streams that mingle in the music of great rivers, linked up with India's civilization and culture, carrying fertility and wealth, spreading life and strength. Traversed by green and fertile hills, blossoming trees bright with orchard gleams, and fields of waving corn, touched by the golden rays in the east, India is bounded on three sides by the palm-clad seashores, chanting to the tune of the ocean waves. On the west coast, the Sea of Oman splashes against the solid rocks of the city of Porbandar in Saurashtra. The houses are chiefly built of white and soft stone. The distant Barda hills keep guard over the white city, otherwise known as Sudamapuri. Porbandar has been mainly a commercial town. An enterprising and sturdy people have traded from remote antiquity with lands beyond the seas, Arabia and Africa. The town was the ancestral home of the Gandhis, who belonged to the Vaishnav cult. It was here that Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi was born on the morning of October 2nd, 1869. This house is associated with an incident which instilled the spirit of Satyagraha in Mohan's blood. The Gandhi family played an important part in the political life of the state. Uttam Chand Gandhi, Mohan's grandfather, was the Diwan of Porbandar. Being a staunch believer in the purity of justice, once he had a tussle with the regent for sheltering an innocent grocer. The soldiers of the state shelled his house. With a firm determination to sacrifice himself and the members of his family at the altar of justice, he remained undaunted, praying to God. Karamchand Gandhi, Mohan's father, succeeded Uttam Chand as Diwan. Karamchand, like his father, was a man of principle and loved virtue more than wealth. Mohan's mother, Putlibai, was deeply religious and had a strong personality. She would take the hardest vows without flinching. Her influence, more than any other, molded the character of Mohan. At the age of 6, Mohan was sent to school close to his house. As a student, he was mediocre but punctual. While he was very gentle and playful, he was obstinate. In this small room, his books and his lessons were his sole companions. In the Gandhi family, the Tulsi Ramayana was recited regularly. Mohan was taught by Rambha, his nurse, to repeat the name of Ram as a remedy for his fear of ghosts. That laid the foundation of his deep devotion to Ram. Mohan was only 7 when his father left the service of the Porbandar state and moved with his family to Rajkot. Karamchand Gandhi was soon appointed the Diwan of the state. Mohan and his brother Karsandas were admitted to the primary school. Once an itinerant showman came to their place. One of the pictures he showed was of Shravana, carrying his blind parents on a pilgrimage. The picture left on Mohan's mind an indelible impression of a son's devotion to his parents. Just about this time, he happened to see the play Harish Chandra, which inspired him to follow truth and go through all ordeals for its sake. Rajkot was one of the few towns in Saurashtra to have a high school. Young Mohan entered the Katyawar High School when he was 12. Mohan was forbidden to touch a scavenger who used to come to their house. Though young and dutiful, he argued with his mother that untouchability was not sanctioned by religion, and that touching a scavenger could not be sinful. At the early age of 13, Mohan was married to Kasturbai, of the same age, at Porbandar. Soon he assumed the authority of a husband. In 1887, Mohandas Gandhi passed the matriculation examination from the Ahmedabad Center and joined the Samaldas College at Bhavnagar. But at the end of the first term, he left the college to proceed to England to study law. Lakshmidas, his brother, arranged for funds to send him abroad. Mother consented only after Mohandas took an oath not to touch wine, women, and meat. This oath saved him from many pitfalls in London. At the age of 18, he sailed from Bombay on September 4, 1888, despite stiff resistance from caste elders to his going overseas. On his arrival in London, Mohandas found everything strange around him. He almost starved himself as he found the vegetarian food tasteless, yet he remained true to his vow. He went in for well-tailored suits and took lessons in dancing and music to become an English gentleman. Mohandas Gandhi joined the Inner Temple to qualify as a barrister on November 6, 1888. Informing his brother about his admission, he wrote that it filled his heart with joy and that he did not need meat or liquor in spite of bitter cold. The aspirant, after being an English gentleman, chose to convert himself into a serious student and framed his own timetable to the minute. He invested much money in textbooks, studied them with unflagging interest, and he read Roman law in Latin. To simplify his living, he rented a room and cooked his own food. The change harmonized his inner and outer urges. He joined the London Vegetarian Society, came in contact with many interesting persons, began his own experiments in dietetics, and contributed articles on Hindu customs and diet to the Society's magazine. Alcohol he described as an enemy of mankind and a curse of civilization. Towards the end of 1889, Mohandas read the Bhagavad Gita for the first time in Arnold's translation, the song Celestial, along with the original. The verse in the second chapter, teaching that renunciation is the highest form of religion, impressed him deeply. The Gita gave him the light he needed and opened to him a new way of life. At the instance of a friend, Mohandas read the Bible. He liked the New Testament, and the Sermon on the Mount went straight to his heart. This reading whetted his appetite for studying the lives of great religious teachers, and he acquainted himself with the principal religions of the world. He first met Dadabhai Naoroji, the grand old man of India, during this period. He became a source of inspiration to young Mohandas. M.K. Gandhi passed his examination with credit and was called to the bar on June 10, 1891. His 3 years' stay in England was eventful, as those were the years of great intellectual activity and freedom of thought and speech. The sea was stormy on July 5th when barrister Mohandas Gandhi landed at Bombay. The joy of homecoming was turned into boundless grief for him. She, whom he was so eager to meet, his beloved mother, had passed away. In Bombay, Gandhi came in contact with Raj Chandra, a merchant and a poet absorbed in godly pursuits. He captivated Gandhi and became his guide and spiritual refuge. To establish legal practice, gain experience of courts, and study Indian law, Barrister Gandhi applied for admission as an advocate to the Bombay High Court. Not finding enough work, disappointed, he soon left for Rajkot. In April 1893, Gandhi set forth for South Africa to appear in a lawsuit on behalf of an Indian firm on a year's contract. After a month's journey, he landed at Durban. The racial discrimination in the society startled him and cut him to the quick. When the coolie barrister, as he was called, appeared in the Durban court, he was ordered to remove his turban. Gandhi felt insulted, demurred, and left. The press described him as an unwelcome visitor. As a victim of the color bar, he received thrashings and suffered grave insults, but yet he refused to sue the white assailants for personal grievances. During his stay in South Africa, the spiritual urge within him became a living force. He studied different faiths and practiced self-restraint. Tolstoy's "The Kingdom of God is Within You" overwhelmed him. After a year's stay, while about to leave for India, at a farewell party, he learned that the South African government was to introduce a bill to disfranchise Indians. He said, "The bill is the first nail into our coffin." He took up the cause of his disinherited countrymen. Thus began the long battle against race prejudice. Gandhi subordinated his legal career to public work and drew up a petition, the first ever sent by Indians to a South African legislature, demanding the retention of the right to franchise. The agitation infused a new life into the community. South Africa became the land of his adoption. Along with his colleagues, Gandhi founded the Natal Indian Congress to remove the hardships of the Indians and to promote harmony between them and the Europeans. Then followed years of hard work and organizing, with all the force and energy at his command. He appealed to the higher sense of his adversaries and brought home to them that their treatment of the Indians was not in conformity with justice and morality. Gandhi's public activities went hand in hand with his spiritual progress. He read widely, about 80 books, which made him realize the infinite possibilities of universal love. He read the sayings of Zarathustra. The beauty of Hindu scriptures began to grow upon him. Irving's Life of Muhammad increased his admiration for the Prophet. The Indians commissioned Gandhi to lay their grievances before public men and public bodies in India. On June 5, 1896, he sailed home, carrying great responsibilities at the young age of 26. Gandhi visited the principal centers of political life in India. His impassioned speeches stirred the Indian mind. The green pamphlet depicting the conditions of the Indians in South Africa aroused the people's consciousness. He met great Indian leaders. Justice Ranade listened to him with attention. The man who could effectively guide him was Sir Ferozshah Mehta, who met him as a loving father. Sir Ferozshah seemed to him like the Himalayas. He met Lokmanya Tilak, who promised him every help. The Lokmanya, he thought, was like the ocean. Gopal Krishna Gokhale invited him to his bosom like the river Ganga. In response to an urgent cable from Natal, Gandhi left India with Kasturbai on November 28, 1896. On reaching the port of Durban, the ship was put in quarantine because of the white residents' agitation for the repatriation of the Indians. After 23 days of quarantine, when Gandhi landed, some European youngsters pelted him with stones, snatched away his turban, and kicked him. Even then, his heart did not arraign his assailants. Though he declined to prosecute them, the incident fanned the flame of prejudice against the Indians. Bills imposing stringent restrictions on Indian trade and immigration were introduced by the South African government. Gandhi sought help from leading men in India and England to create public opinion against the disabilities of the Indians in Natal. In this little house in Durban, a period of introspection dawned in Gandhi's life. He developed a passion for self-help and simplicity. He studied the book, Advice to a Mother, equipped himself with the knowledge necessary for the physical, mental, and spiritual well-being of his children, and infused a spirit of service and self-respect in them. He longed for humanitarian service and worked in a hospital. When a leper came to his door, Gandhi offered him shelter, dressed his wounds, and looked after him. On the outbreak of the Boer War between the Dutch settlers and the British in 1899, Gandhi's loyalty to the empire drove him to side with the British, though his sympathies were with the Boers. he organized an Indian ambulance corps and left for the front. They worked under the fire of enemy guns and carried wounded soldiers to hospitals through heat and dust. The humble work of the sons of the empire was applauded, and they were awarded the War Medal. On the eve of Gandhi's departure for India, after 6 years' stay in South Africa, the Indians bathed him with the nectar of love and presented him with an address and costly gifts. The gifts agitated him deeply. Having accepted a life of service and conquered infatuation for jewelry, Gandhi created a trust of the gifts in favor of the community. On his return to India in 1901, Gandhi reached Calcutta to pay his first visit to the Indian National Congress, moved a resolution on the conditions of the Indians in South Africa, and pleaded for India's active sympathy. There was no limit to insanitation in the Congress camp. He gave the volunteers object lessons in sweeping and scavenging. Before settling down, Gandhi made an extensive tour of India. To acquaint himself with the hardships of the passengers, he traveled third class. Gandhi informed Gokhale that he had opened an office in Bombay. Just when he seemed to be settling down, he received an unexpected cable from South Africa and returned to Natal at the call of his countrymen. Realizing that he must remain in Transvaal and fight the battle through, he set up his office in Johannesburg. He was enrolled as an attorney of the Supreme Court. The spirit of sacrifice gradually grew stronger and changed his mode of life. The Gita became an infallible guide of conduct. Aparigraha, non-possession, and samabhava, equability, presupposed a change of heart, a change of attitude for Gandhi. In a letter to his brother, he explained how his life was becoming truth-intoxicated and declared his intention to renounce his worldly possessions and to utilize his savings for the community. Seeking to purify his physical self, he read treatises on nature cure. His dislike for medicine steadily increased, and he fasted and experimented in dietetics. He had great faith in earth treatment and applied the mud poultice to ailing patients. He wrote Guide to Health to help the people to keep the temple of the spirit, the human body, in a fit condition. He believed that perfect health can be attained by living in obedience to the laws of God. Gandhi felt the need of a journal specially devoted to the cause of the Indians. In June 1903, the weekly Indian Opinion was launched in 4 languages. Week after week, Gandhi poured out his soul in its columns. For him, the single aim of journalism was service of truth. During a journey, he became absorbed in the perusal of Ruskin's Unto This Last. which teaches that men can be happy only if they obey the moral law. He discovered some of his deepest convictions reflected in the book, which brought about an instantaneous and practical transformation in his life. Later, he paraphrased the book, entitling it Sarvodaya, the welfare of all, and maintained that if every Indian stuck to truth, Swaraj will come of its own accord. Convinced that the life of labor is a life worth living, Gandhi bought a fruit orchard at Phoenix. He formed a nucleus of a settlement which led a Spartan life. The colony was self-supporting, and the material requirements of life were reduced to a minimum. Indian opinion was printed at the farm. Settlers learned all aspects of press work. Hand power was preferred to mechanical power. This paved the way for the highest moral uplift of the settlers. Gandhi kept a close track of events in India. He advocated the abolition of the salt tax, called for united opposition to Bengal's partition, supported the boycott of British goods, and hailed the Swadeshi movement. He emphasized the need for communal harmony, commended the adoption of Vande Mataram as India's national anthem, and of Hindustani as a common language for achieving nationhood. He supported the demand for home rule in the name of justice and humanity.